Welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. Well, it's been a fun first day for me at Trout and Salmon. I've really enjoyed talking with Andrew, with Richard and the team there, and I've got some amazing things planned that I hope you're going to enjoy. My guest today, Chris Galvin, what an amazing person he is. You'll get a sense of his warmth, his passion. He's a Michelin Star chef who is a fly angler. And our conversation transcends just fishing. It, of course, is circling around it, but we talk about his career in the kitchen and a whole lot more. And I discover about him as a person as well, and how fishing has been a lovely, welcome respite from the many hours that he spends in the kitchen. So he's a wonderful man. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Are you well?
Very well, thanks, Pete. Pleasure to be on with you.
It's great to have you along. There's much to talk about. I know we've been talking a fair bit off mic as well, but let's start with the important stuff first. How's your fishing year been so far?
I've had an amazing fishing year this year. It's been particularly a great season. The river I fish on, sort of North Essex. Last year was tough year. Not much insect life. Lots and lots of cormorants, which we felt, stripped the river in some way. And I felt very guilty because I persuaded a chum to join the club, and then we had a fruitless season. But this year's been a bounty, and the fish have been rising. It's been wonderful. I've never caught so many fish on a dry fly. And grayling, the grayling have appeared, which was a fantastic program 3 years ago, and fingerlings were introduced. And now they're sort of 12 ounce in size, and so it's been an incredible program. So, yeah, I've been lucky enough to fish the test. I've been on our river a lot. I've had a couple of visits to a reservoir at Grapham, and so yeah, I've been super lucky. Brilliant this year. I couldn't ask for more.
Sounds like a really nice, varied mix. Where would you, and you've hinted, I think, probably to where your home water actually is, but do you want to tell listeners where it is?
Yeah, it's actually on Amwell Magna, which is said to be one of the oldest fly fishing clubs, just north of Harlow. It's a magnificent water. It was appeared in Sir Isaac Wharton's Complete Angler. And, I have to tell you, Pete, hair goes up in my arms, because when I read that, the journey from London, so much so that I actually get on my folding bike at Stratford, get off at St Margaret's, and I ride to the water very often, or I walk it as they did, or some of the older members have told me that they actually used to get on a horse and cart. But there's actually nothing like it when you walk through the gate and you just see that magnificent water with so much history. I always think of the great fly fishers before me with their split cane, and it's never been less than magical. 3 seasons on, I count myself as being very, very lucky to fish it. The club are magnificent. We have the bailiff Martin. He just keeps it in beautiful shape. It's not like the test, which is a bit like Wimbledon. I love the test, but it just has a different magic to it, and it's ebbs and flows. And I've never once tired, even on blanks. I've never tired of fishing it. And there's always kingfishers to see, stoats, deer, and kites. I just often we talk outside the fishing hut. We will just talk about fishing, and I've even been taught to tie flies bankside. So it's a wonderful club, and I'm super lucky to be part of it. So it's given me a love of rivers. I started on a concrete basin at Walthamstow. When I first started thinking about fishing, first thing I got wrong was I'd see trout flies, and trying to teach myself to cast, because somewhere like Walthamstow's, on a windy day, you've got to shoot that line out, and I wasn't getting very far. But I blanked 20 times, and my wife said, "You must really love that."
That's really lovely. And that just goes to show, doesn't it, when something bites deep, it really does. And I remember another place in Essex, for listeners, we're talking around north to east London and out a little bit further into our homeland of Essex. And, the first time I hit a still water many, many years ago, that I caught a fish, and the guy said, "Are you not going to carry on fishing?" And I was just so astounded that I caught a fish. I went home and couldn't believe it. It was absolutely extraordinary feeling. And I'm sure that's going to resonate with many people too. But I'd like to swing back a bit, because you talk about the Amwell Magna Club. And as you know, I know it pretty well because I used to be a member many, many years ago. And it's a fabulous little club. It's a little piece of heaven that you just wouldn't expect to be there. And there's even a tiny little chalk stream, the Ash, that comes into it. And I remember going to do a job that I didn't like very much, but I'd sit at my desk in the morning and feel the nettle burns from sliding down to try and get into the Ash to fish that. And like you say, it's a wonderfully managed club. It's interesting to fish. And like you say, it's a nice bunch of people in there as well. And funnily enough, this is mildly ironic, that I remember seeing the advert in Trout and Salmon that they were looking for members and joined straight away. And how did you find out about the club?
Actually, it's a lovely story, Pete. I was cooking in the restaurant, and we'd had a problem with some of our umbrellas in the back garden. The heaters weren't turning off when they collapsed them, so we'd gone through 2 sets of 10,000 quid's worth of umbrellas. And this chap come walking past the kitchen, and he looked at me, he said, "What the hell are you still doing cooking?" And I thought, what the hell's this? And very kindly, it was a chap called Derek, who's a member of the club. He'd come in just to help us out because the company we'd bought the umbrellas had gone bust, and he was helping advise us where to get the canvas and the frames from. And I said, "Well, you know what? I need to slow down. I'm getting towards the wrong end of 60." And he said, "Well, you should do a bit of fishing, fly fishing." And I said, "I would love to fly fish." Bless him, Derek is a great friend. He's taken me to so many waters. We've been to Grapham, we've been down to Farmore, we've been all over the show, and he took me as a guest to Amwell Magna, and I was pinching myself just to be on them banks. And I'm a huge fan of Fergal Sharkey. Everything he's done, he was the president, now he's honorary member. Still fighting. You could still meet Fergal on the bank. What a lovely guy. But there I was on the banks of Amwell Magna, desperately trying to cast differently, moving on from Walthamstow, trying to whack it out 30 metres. Now, I had a very, very small river to fish on, but I caught my first trout, and I'll never, ever, ever forget. I don't know, it's just the take, just the power of a fish, the way it went away, and my heart beating like a damn drum. And finally getting in the net, I was just praying it wasn't get off. And Derek very kindly, I went as a guest a couple more times, and he said, "You should put your name down." So I went on a waiting list for it was just about a year and a half, something like that. And I was able to join, and it's the best thing I've ever done. And it did exactly what Derek said it would do. It took the stress, because being a Michelin Star chef is extremely stressful, and being able to get through that gate, and you coined it perfectly, it's a little piece of heaven. You close the gate behind you, walk across the footbridge, and the mill stream is underneath you, and you face Cottage Pool. And I'm in another world. I cannot think of anything else. It's just, I can't explain it. It's just a wonderful world. So absolutely blessed. And, the guys at Farlow's, what has struck me with fly fishing is what a wonderful world of very special people, prepared to give you time, prepared to give you advice. And that's my drop by. My wife thought something was going on. I was in Farlow's so much because the credit card was taking a battering, but I was spending hours and hours in gleaning bits of information from all the guys that they're amazing in there. They all know Amwell Magna. They all know Walthamstow. Have you tried the Wandle? Have you tried the Itchin? And I said, oh my gosh, there's so much to take in. But it really helped me with my fly selection, helped me with my fly tying materials. the advice is just first class from there. I tie so many flies now during the close season. I haven't been back for a little while, but I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting in on an evening. That I saw that you've got an evening at Farlow's coming up shortly. But yeah, it's time to pop back in there. So I'm just amazed, whichever water it is, the bailiffs, the fishermen you bump into, I've just got incredible stories. Will always lend you a fly. If a fly is fishing particularly well, my gosh, they're not hiding it. They're actually saying, have one, take it. And so that's important to me now. If I'm on a water and I'm doing well, I always try and make sure I give a fly to somebody or give a pattern.
That's a lovely way to look at it. And I think of it very much like, when you let somebody past in your car and you wave to them and then they suddenly wave back. And then that feeds out, doesn't it? That positivity feeds out to people, doesn't it? It's good to be able to do that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And let's spin back a little bit, because when you were talking about the places you're fishing, and it strikes me that it was more traditional still water and then perhaps moving to rivers. I could, of course, be wrong, but you talked about the Amwell Magna with such passion, such love. When you arrived there and started fishing, did you suddenly think, actually, this is for me? Rivers are probably, I like it all, but I think my heart probably sticks with rivers.
It's rivers have a special magic. I love fishing all waters. I get a thrill on a reservoir, and I'm sure I'll get on a boat at some point shortly with Derek. But rivers, there's a magic to it. I'm not sure what it is, but I really love that. And in actual fact, Pete, I was thinking, what got me into fishing? And it was my parents, and you may or may not believe this, they took me to a place in Cornwall called Perranporth. And there's a river that runs out to sea there with a beautiful old stone bridge. And I was 3-4 years old, and I saw these youngsters. They were actually, what I realise now, were trying to tickle trout. And I saw these beautiful, just the colour of a trout is, especially a wild fish, is something else. I will never get over that. I love beautiful things. I love sculpture. My daughter, she's an artist, studied in Florence, and so we have a shared love of beautiful things. But a trout, a salmon, a grayling, sea trout, there's just something so special about them. And I remember from that age spotting the fish. I don't know, they were just next to the mouth of the sea at Perranporth. And in fact, once I got into fly fishing, I went back 2 years ago to Perranporth just to see, was I dreaming it? And I found those tiny rivers that go down to the sea, and the fish were rising like billy-o. The further up, wild fish were rising there. And so, that kind of really got me into it. But rivers, I absolutely love. And I'm at a crossroads as I sort of kind of semi-retire. I'm going to move to Cowes, and I suddenly thought, crikey, that's a long journey to Amwell. And I thought, I've just discovered something I really, really love, and that's going to be a slog to get there. And I've promised myself, if I can't make more than 10 visits, then I should give it to someone else, my membership. But I didn't know that the test was so close to Southampton. Silly me. Froome, the River Froome, which I got to fish on, and is another story. I learned about wild fish there and not being so clumsy. And then I've got this dream, Pete, of discovering if there's trout in the River Yar or the Medina, because I've seen, I'm sure, tiny fish at Newport at the head of the river. So, I'm wondering, that could be a life discovery if I could catch a trout in one of those.
That would be fantastic, and I'll stay tuned to hear that news. You said so many interesting things there to me. One of them was where you saw this river in Perranporth and you'd seen these fish, and it made me think, I wondered if you came from a family of anglers or you had the fishing gene, and this is the thing that triggered and fired off the fishing gene or the interest in it.
Actually, yeah, two of my uncles, which is often the case, they're great coarse fishermen. And so I think when I was about 5 or 6, they bought me an Airfix rod, and I fished a lake that you might well know is at Weald Park, South Weald, beautiful old glacial lakes full of carp, roach, bream, and I caught a roach first time I went. So that was it, as they say. I was hooked for life, and I became a fanatic coarse fisherman. You know, I was so lucky. My dad disappeared early in my life, so I was allowed to roam quite a lot, and so much so I would fish night after night, night fishing for pike on the Chelmer. At the age of, I've lost my mum now, so she'd be in trouble. But I was 10, 11 years old, fishing under the motorway, catching pike. I used to travel by train up to Cambridgeshire, and I would fish the fens. We would catch live bait in one river, and then we could punt across, and the 40-foot train, we would catch zander. When I was 12 years old, we were catching zander, and what a fish. They said that they were going to infiltrate all of our rivers, but I don't know it just stopped. I don't know how. But as a chef in France, I spent a lot of time working in France. Zander is such a prized fish. And as soon as I could get cooking with it, I used to use zander all the time. It's one of my favorite fish to eat. But they've even, they kind of disappeared off the fishmonger's slabs. So I'm not quite sure. I know there's some big ones up at Grapham, which I'd love to have a go at one day. But yeah, it was just two uncles, and one of them still coarse fishes. I think he's well into his 80s, nearly 90. So I do love all fishing. Nothing like a float bobbing under the water, or it's or just being on the bank, Pete. To be honest,
That sounds a really cool upbringing, and I was doing something. I was quite feral as a youngster as well, and being able to do those things, I think, was character forming for me as well. So I enjoyed that. It was fascinating what you said about the zander. I believe Europe they call them pike perch, is it?
yes.
And how would you describe them to eat?
I would say they're close to sea bass. Beautiful, firm texture. They have a flavour of their own. I love the deep cooking of Lyon. Probably the Rhone Valley is where my brother and I, we love deep cooking French food. And so the wines of the Rhone, very mineral, lots of different expressions of a great bear. And often you'll find zander on a menu in Lyon. And it's robust. It can take a good red wine sauce with it. And of course, pike as well. Pike is very popular in Lyon. We tend to make a mousse from it because it's so bony. But delicious river fish. I've tried carp, and I can't get on with it. It's a bit too muddy for me. Definitely zander. If I saw it on a menu, I order it every time. I just went on. I'm so lucky in my life as a chef. I love wine as well, so I travel all around Europe, visiting vineyards, because vineyards inspire me to cook. They tend to cook with the ingredients that are close to the vineyard, and often I watch the wife of a vigneron, and I often steal dishes from her. So about 2 months ago, I was down in Chablis, Sancerre, and we were next to the River Loire, which is very famous for its zander, its pike. They do a terrine, in actual fact, in honor of three of the main fish of the River Loire, and it's a terrine of salmon, pike and zander, and it's absolutely beautiful. There they use a lot of butter, white wine, shallots. I'm making myself hungry here as I'm talking, by the way. But I love zander, and sea as well. But again, it was reckless, and it was stupidly dangerous. Once I learned I love the sea, but I used to lay underneath the pier at Southend, and the tide used to cut us off, and we used to fish for pollock, for whiting, dabs, and we'd take them home, and Mum would cook them. And I'd love that. I would get up 5 in the morning, and I wouldn't get home 10, 11 at night. I would fish until we were thrown off the pier. But I love sea fishing as well. I'm just discovering bass on the fly. That is something I would love to do. And this fly world, my gosh, I've spotted bonefish, and and on it goes. You know, these have I got enough life? I'm not sure. My dream, my dream is a sea trout, to be honest. And even if I could watch someone salmon fishing, I guess if I could do that, I'd die happy.
I'm sure you're going to get lots of people reach out, but the first one to reach out's me, because you've got to come down and have a go then. And I'd like catching sea trout on dry flies as well when they're around. So we can have a go at that. You can have a go at salmon fishing. So all you've got to do is say with that. And you know, we've alluded again to our background and where we grew up in Essex and Southend Pier. I know incredibly well. I spent a lot of time down in that neck of the woods. And it's been a fascinating curve for me to try and learn about, because one of the things I would really, really love to try and do is catch a trout in Essex. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think to catch a trout. I've been out to Chigborough and still water there, which I really enjoy. And we own a pub, a beautiful pub, 700-year-old pub in Chelmsford in Essex. We have a river, the River Chelmer, at the bottom of our garden. We have a 1.5 acre garden, which is truly beautiful. You know, going back to art, I love reading. I'm a total bookworm, and I'm just in a bit of jealousy looking at the books on your shelves behind you. I read a lot about Constable, you know, proud Essex, Suffolk, you know, on the border. I used to fish the Stour a lot. When my father left, I had an uncle who lived in Bury St Edmunds, and bless them, you know, I used to get on a national coach from Brentwood High Street. They would pick me up in Bury St Edmunds, pack me off with my sandwiches in a tin foil, and I would fish from first light till last light on the River Stour. And I actually got that uncle into it. He said, "How can you sit watching a float all day?" And I said, "I just love it. I love the serenity. I love the people I meet. I love the wildlife. I love watching the clouds." And he really got into pike fishing, so much so he become one of the best anglers in the area. So, yeah, I love Constable country. And where our pub is, it's a beautiful vista across the river, up into the fields with the beautiful kites flying, and this time of year, pheasants running across the fields. But the River Chelmer at the bottom, I thought I saw a trout in there. And so I have two brothers. My youngest brother is famously the other Michelin Star chef. You know, very proudly, we're the only British brothers to have a Michelin Star each from different restaurants. And but our middle brother, he nobody knows much about him. Was a brilliant chef, but he was too hot-tempered. Whereas my brother and I we've never had a crossword even in the height of a battle of a busy kitchen. But David is, yeah, but he's a great hunter. And he's a great fisherman, amazing carp fisherman and tench fisherman. And he said, "Did you say there's trout in there?" And I said, "Yeah, but you're leaving them alone. You're not touching them because they look wild, that no one's going to fish it." And I caught the devil down there with a maggot and a float. And sure enough, he had this beautiful wildie out there. And I said, "That's it. Never again." So, there's a good head of brown trout in the Chelmer. So, yeah, to catch a trout would be possible. Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure that if you go all the way down to the Blackwater to Morden area, yeah, possibly there. And there's also, if you, Beeley Abbey, where the Blackwater comes up to the canal, the Chelmer, there's a massive head of mullet. So that's another one I want to try on a fly. But yeah, I would love to catch one on the right river. I would love that.
And I should have probably said a little bit more that I meant wild brown trout in Essex. And yeah, I'd heard that they were in the Chelmer. And Rob Mungroven from the Wild Trout Trust, I phoned him up and said, "Oh, where should I go?" And he mentioned some other places in North Essex as well. But I would suspect that if you've got wild brown trout, and he'd mentioned the Chelmer as well, if they're in there, you're probably getting sea trout as well, would be my very humble guess. So it might be worth going down on a summer's evening and see if anyone's splushing about, because you might be pleasantly surprised.
Wow, that's interesting. Incidentally, this year has been an absolute bumper year, Mel Magna, for wildies. I think it's the book's full of wild trout this year, and they are just magnificent fish. It's just, yeah, all of us, every single member, when we catch one, we're so happy, and they're getting big, Pete. Yeah. One of the Graham Cash, he's amazing. He runs the club magnificently. He's had some wildies in there, beautiful fish. So they're breeding. They're doing well. Just the whole grayling project at Amwell Magna, I'm stunned because I've caught them up to, they're around 12 ounce now, 10, 12 ounce. Further up the river, I hooked one and it was near a pound. And just because I saw the dorsal fin come out of the water in a beautiful riffle, yeah, they're thriving. So thanks to all the pressure that everyone's giving on the water boards and all the hard work of the teams that are, looking after the water, I'm just happy that I'm alive at this moment to see what's happening. And as you say, the Wild Trout Trust and just everything everyone's doing. Because again, being a chef, because I've handled so many fish, and as a kid on Chelmsford Market, every town used to have 2 or 3 fishmongers, big blocks of ice. The eels would be live, thriving around. The smell would be beautiful, clean, and they've disappeared. I'm very, very careful about where I buy my fish from. But as the populations are getting bigger, people are eating more fish, we're starting to rely on farms more and more. But there's farms and there's farms. So none of our ingredients in our restaurants are purchased unless we visit the farms, be it for our beef, be it for our veal, lamb, salads, vegetables. We go everywhere. We make sure we know all of our suppliers. And we had 2 restaurants in Edinburgh for 6 years. And I remember going to a salmon farm. I went to several, and it broke my heart. I was absolutely stunned at the poor condition of the fish. I almost stopped overnight to buy salmon. But then there was one farm that was using no chemicals. It was using RSPCA approved feed. It was drying the nets rather than putting anti-fouling on the nets. It was lifting the nets, letting them dry, letting all the shellfish that were getting stuck on the nets that dragged them down drop away. And then as soon as they had a batch of salmon, they would let the seabed lay fallow and they would move it. So there's farmed fish and there's farmed fish, but it's breaking my heart. Someone that's just discovering the joys and the history and everything around salmon fishing, which is why I honestly mean I would just love to watch someone fish for salmon. I love the Gone Fishing program, and just watching spey casting. I think, oh my gosh, it's taken me 3 years to not be a great caster, but just to see him spey casting and just everything that comes with salmon fishing. The fact that our rivers have just been, they've been emptied of salmon. And, for generations, we're not going to be able to see it properly. There are these great stories of the River Tyne, which I've read about. But, it's just how lucky are we, Pete, that we got these people that champion a fight and just won't let it go and get it brought back, because we must. We must really fight hard. And there can be no more joy seeing wild fish. Sorry, we were talking about wild fish. But there can be no more joy than seeing a wild fish swimming in a river. And it's probably where I started, at Perranporth.
Beautiful story. Beautiful one. You are a distinguished chef, restaurateur, and I get the sense that in your community, some of your colleagues as well are fly anglers too. Would I be right with that?
Absolutely. I got the shock of my life. It's a close community, like any industry. And, not most of our lives, most chefs my age, we worked probably 75, 80 hours a week, I would say. Often we touched 100 hours. But thank heavens now, things have changed and it doesn't go on as much as it did. But we were always told, Pete, when I worked at the Ritz, when I was very young, worked at the Ritz Hotel, we were told, oh, you'll make it. One day you'll make it. That's why you do your 80 hours and you get paid 40. But probably 1% make it. And so what's lovely now is, one of my chums is executive chef of Ritz Hotel and just achieved his 2-star Michelin, and the chairman of a Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, Adam Byatt. He's a Michelin Star chef. He's an avid fly fisher. Probably my best buddy on the riverbank is Roger Pisey, and he was Marco Pierre White's pastry chef for excess of 25 years, and he's now the executive pastry chef for Fortnum and Masons. So every year he has a charity fish down at the John Lewis estate, a couple of lakes down there at Leckford. If we're lucky, we get a turn to go on the test, which is, I never, ever, ever thought I'd get near the test. I pinched myself and that was one of Roger's charity days. But yeah, we have a great bit, but I couldn't believe it. There was about 16 Michelin Star chefs all turned up, from a head chef for Tom Kerridge, right across the boards, some very famous names. But it probably is the fact that it's relaxing. You can chill, you can talk. Of course, we can cook the fish. That's fun. And then, of course, it gets a bit competitive because we all got to bring something to cook. But it's surprising the food that chefs love. We like comfort food. And last time I took some beautiful puy lentils with some smoked Morteau sausage. Yeah, some great dishes. But I was watching Roger Pisey whip up a trifle with Adam at Riverbank. I don't know if you know Mark Hicks. He's a great chef, fabulous chef, and he's written a book about cooking and being on the bank. And his favourite chum created the Peak Hotels and their barbecues and the wines they drink. Some serious wines on the riverbank. Yeah, so I didn't realise what a chefy thing it was. And in fact, we'll be grayling fishing. There'll be several of us down at Timsbury in a couple of weeks' time. And that will be a feast and a half. I should send you some pictures, or we'll invite you next year, Pete. And it's a real gourmet feast on a riverbank.
That must be amazing, because I sort of picture sometimes it might be a petrol station sandwich for me, but even when you're sort of fishing on your own for the day, if you're going down to Amwell, how does lunch sort of position itself for you then?
Yeah, it's a good question. During the summer, the nicer days is often a really bespoke picnic. It comes out, and one of a lovely member, a new member at the club, John. He's amazing guy. He hadn't fished for a long time, and he gave himself the tag the incomplete angler, because he kind of forgotten. He kept saying, "I think I've caught a grayling, but it was a chub or it was a dace." And it was causing huge hilarity. But now he's on it now. He's got his eye in, and he's getting pretty deadly on the riverbank. And he said, "Oh, do you mind if I cook for you and Roger?" And he did the most amazing wild mushroom soup. We had this fantastic sausage roll, which was made with black pudding, and some beautiful spices, and then a beautiful, like a tiramisu we had at the end. So, and a Pimm's. He made sure we started with a Pimm's. So I got a bit worried about the fishing later on. But yeah, we've had some great picnics on the riverbank, I have to say. Actually, you just reminded me, one of the members, we did an end of season supper at the Fly Fishers Club. Again, how would a young Essex boy from a council estate ever get into the Fly Fishers Club? And again, the hairs are going up on my arm now. Just being allowed into the building. Burgle, he took the head of a table and he explained about the largest, one of the largest libraries in the world, fly fishing. And what was, created a lot of hilarity. There's actually a book called The Incomplete Angler. There's some incredible rods that are in glass cases. There's some beautiful, beautiful flies that, thank heavens, they've made to secure from around the world. There's even a fly tied by President Eisenhower above a fireplace. So yeah, I have to pinch myself how lucky I've been. And the food was just wonderful, of course, and some beautiful claret was served. But it was a wonderful, wonderful night, and yeah, it was very special. Equally, though, at the other end of the spectrum, where I'm so obsessed with fly tying now, and again, everyone's been so helpful. I love going to the British Fly Fair, the international show in Stoke. So the members, David and Derek, they take me up every year. My wife says, surely no more fur and feather, but it's never enough. But we'll often buy a pie. We'll often have a cup of tea and a pie. And it's just as delicious because I take a backpack, but always end up coming back with a number of shopping bags. I should shout out a huge thanks to all the incredible fly tyers out there from the British team, the guys that come from all around the world to demonstrate flies. How lucky are we that we get into a show that's really super reasonable. We get a free copy of a magazine, and then you can chat to some of the world's greatest fly tyers. I just find it amazing that they give you their time, their tips. Often they'll give you a fly if you ask how they tie something. I was looking to buy a lamp for my fly table, and I was looking at these hugely expensive ones, and I thought, crikey, how am I going to hide this from the wife? And he said, no, I get this one on Amazon. It's a hobby light, and it's brilliant. So, and it was about 20 quid. So, but that's one of the top fly ties in the world. So, and there's a great buy and sell as kind of, you can, like an auction where I bought my first sage rod, which I loved. And just recently I bought a beautiful sage dart. I thought, you know what, I'm going for a Ferrari. And the team at Farlow's were brilliant. We practiced and, we looked at everything and got everyone's opinion. And I bought a beautiful Hardy reel. And I thought, this one's got to be hidden from my wife. There's no way I'm getting away with this now. I've just spent too much money. And of course, they said it was terribly embarrassing. After bringing the shop to a standstill, they said, your card, there's not enough money on your card. And it was a phone call from hell. I just rang my wife and said, you need to transfer some money. For what? Not another rod. How much? I said, don't go there. Just put a lot of money across. And the funniest thing was, I was just blown away how light this thing was. And it's like a magic wand. And I got home and, of course, she was waiting for me to come through the door with my son. And I said, no, I'm telling you, this thing is magical. See how light it is. So I gave him the tube and he said, my gosh, that's light. Because he loves motor racing. He's into all things that are light. And he says, unbelievable. And I said, wait till you feel the rod. So I'd unscrewed the cap and there was nothing in there. In the excitement of the purchase and the lack of funds, we forgot to put the rod in the tube. So I panicked, rang them, and I thought, I hope they remember me. But of course, how could they forget me? And I went back to get my sage. So I don't know. And unfortunately, I've had stories from enough people. It's never ending. Tackle, fly tying, it just and on and onwards. But yeah, it keeps me out of trouble.
It's a dangerous road to go down, the tackle one, and the dart's a very nice choice as well. There's a video of me somewhere catching a great big, or quite a nice sea trout on a prototype of it as well. So yes, I can endorse that, and nice choice as well. And when you go to the BFFI, I'm hoping to be there in some way, shape, or form next year too. But are you one of those people who goes around to each tire and watches intently exactly what they're doing?
No, I'm not. I know what I want to learn. So, for instance, this year, I wanted to learn. I've been trying to tie beetles, and I just couldn't get the legs right. I couldn't. I was struggling to fix the legs on. And oh gosh, forgive me. He's a great tire. He looks very wild, long grey beard. I think he's from Sweden or Norway, and he just tied a beetle for me, and it was exceptional. And I'm thrilled to say I caught quite a few trout on it, because that's the thing, Pete. Catching a fish on a fly you've tied is another level. So what I do, is right now I really want to learn to tie a better mayfly, because what I have learned with fly fishing, and Fergal's very good for that, it's so frustrating. You can cast a fly on a fish's nose, drift it over its nose, no interest, then it will snap at something. So Fergal and the guys at club always, say, go down a size, go smaller. So I'm getting into that now. I'm tying smaller. I've got such big hands as a chef, huge hands as a chef, it was frustrating at the beginning. My wife said, I thought fly tying was meant to calm you, but I was getting frustrated. But, after a couple of years tying, I'm getting better and better and working on smaller hooks now. And with the mayfly, Graham from a club, he said, try this, because I had a beautiful tiny CDC that helped me out on the Froome. When I fished the Froome, I just scared every fish. I didn't know that they were all wild. So I walked nearly 4 miles with my friend Roger. He caught 3 nice fish. And we got to the end. I was exhausted. And he knew I had the hump. He knew I was upset. Our friend said, how did you get on? I said, no, nothing. But it doesn't matter. It was a wonderful day. He said, no, come back. He made me do it again. And he just taught me to search the water. And it was the dart, casting with the sage dart was so much more accurate. And I caught one on this beautiful little CDC, one of the last casts of the day. So that will always stay with me. But Graham Cash, he showed me this beautiful, very small mayfly, elk. It's a elk mane. And I just caught so many fish on it, but I only have one fly, and I'm terrified of losing it. So this close season, I'm going to practice on that. But when I go to the Fly Fishers show, I'm going to have a look at that. Just tying more delicately, Pete. And so what I'll do is I'll go round and have a look at what I fancy, wait my turn, because often there's people up close, and they can only. Those guys are amazing. I think chefs are amazing to focus 18 hours a day. But to actually tie, for a couple of days, and I know they do show after show after show, I think is very special. So, yeah, I pick carefully, or I just listen into a conversation. They're really good with that, and they've got so much patience with novices like me. But there's just YouTube and things. Your podcasts. I've been able to learn so much from social media. Which is fabulous. I would never be at this stage if it wasn't for social media. I would never be at this stage. Davey McPhail, and I love watching him tie flies. He's just genius, and I'm lucky because it sent the music, the guitar music. I think it's his son playing it. Sends my wife to sleep, so she doesn't mind if it's last thing at night, listening to the music for Davey McPhail, and then she says his voice sends her away. So his tie is exceptional. And I think he's Lindsay Simpson. He's great. He's so generous with their time and sharing. So, I love this. And so I do love that show, long may it stay. It rains a lot when we go, unfortunately. And it's a long schlep from London to Stoke, but I want to spend a bit more time watching them casting in the showground outside, because I definitely need. I've made the novice's mistake of not getting someone to teach me and learning myself and copying and watching others. And casting's absolutely critical. So I go to the park and I set some hoops out, because I realize when I get there and I see that special fish, or I've managed to creep up on it on my knees, which are my joints are not great now. If I manage to sneak up on it, you got 1 or 2 casts and you've got to get it right. So practice is critical. And when you just see some fishermen, their casting is beautiful.
Yeah, casting's part of the fun of it, I think. And my humble advice would be tilt everything on the side and then watch yourself, see what the rod's doing, see what your loops are looking like, and then figure things out from there. And then you can move it upwards if you need to, or across your body. Don't worry about distance is always my humble advice. Just get the basics right. And then, like you say, when you're on the river, it becomes more second nature. So you're not thinking, am I going to get it there? Perhaps I might get it second time or third or fourth. But if you're getting it first or second time the whole time, you've got much more chance of catching the fish. And you've correctly discovered that the casting is such an important part of it. And the practice is fun as well. And like you say, taking out the hoops can be really good fun, and trying to get a loop through a hoop and all of those sorts of things as well is really worth a go. But it was interesting what you were saying and how passionately you spoke about fly tying. And I wondered if that was also a way of expressing your creativity that you obviously and clearly have as a chef too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really, really enjoy tying a perfect fly. And when you hear someone like Davey McFowle saying, out of 10, I can see one that I've particularly like, I think, my God, I can't see it. I'm looking at it. But it's about proportions, that's for sure. It's so like cooking. It's like the perfect dish. And Martin, the bailiff at our club, he said, come on, Chris, in the close season, I love going to help him. I love going to do a bit of work on the riverbank. And he took me down to the ford at Amwell Magna, and we lifted some stones to see what fly life was in there, just before the season started. And I saw these caddis, we saw some shrimps, there was a lot. And then just trying to imitate it. So they are the YouTube videos I like, where they've got a caddis and you're trying to try and imitate it, and to get it smaller and to get the proportions right. Because strategy-wise, they're just so smart. They've seen it a million. And the longer the season goes on, especially when fish are returned to the water, they get smarter and smarter and smarter. So it better be good. And it's just how, different materials behave in the water, how they're sort of how fast they sink or they float. And I just love natural materials. And I do get a sense. And I guess what really helped me was I didn't know where to buy them, but they're, forgive me, I'm not sure of the name. They're the small plastic pegs at a sprung load. And once you finish tying, you open the spring, put your fly in, and then you can set it in a peg. And I like to build them up and look at them, and that really helps me with my tying. And just in fact, we just prior to our move to the Isle of Wight, I've had to pack all my fly stuff away, so it's back out on the dining table. I need to move it a bit later because I'll be in trouble. But I'm just tying some grayling flies at the moment, some Duracells, and you need to go much smaller. And again, it's proportions on it, but I love it, what the different materials do. And but you go all the way back to Frank Sawyer, and those flies still work perfectly, just absolutely. I got a pheasant tail nymph out last week. It was the last week of the season, and I went, and I thought, I'm going to get the pheasant tail nymph out, and I had a bumper day, an amazing day. So kind of nothing's new.
Yeah, still a classic fly, still a great fly that I love. I love the Duracell very much as well. I think that's one that goes on my end of my fly line quite regularly. So yeah, I like the style there. For listeners as well, we've talked around your career as well, but I'd love to understand, you've talked about some of those hours that you've worked, 70, 80 hours a week. What makes you keep coming back then? What is it that as a 1%er, the people, the people were saying to you when you started that 1%, or you were saying that 1% of people actually make it? Is that 1% because of the hours that are worked? But what makes you keep coming back to it? What is it that is so special to you as a chef to keep you coming into the kitchen every day?
For me, that's a simple answer, Pete. The reason I cook is because I love giving. Took me a little while to work that out, but I think the very act of selecting an ingredient, caring about its sustainability, its journey, how hard farmers work to grow something slowly, that's important, as less intervention, as less chemicals as possible. So, you're selecting something from nature, careful, then you're crafting it, you're preparing it, you're cooking it, and you're trying to compete with nature, really, to make it taste of what it should. And I think it's the act of putting it in front of someone and seeing their faces. So that's kind of my rule when I interview a chef. I don't really mind what they've done, where they've cooked, but I try and get that out of them. Do you like giving? Do you enjoy giving presents at Christmas? Do you like sharing? Do you like because it's called hospitality. So I don't think we got time enough on the show to tell you exactly why I love it, because of the knife work, the steaming, poaching, grilling, frying, cooking on papillote, all the different styles you have to learn. And by the way, for 20 years, I wrote to the best chefs in France, asked if I could come and cook for free. I traveled around France, learning as much as I possibly could. And I felt like I've still just scratched the surface after 52 years cooking. So I love it because of the people I meet in the industry, the asparagus growers, this time of year, quince, big harvest. I don't know if you know, but this year is called a mast season. And this is where trees produce lots of fruit. They double up on their fruit. Acorn, people might have noticed in their garden, double the amount of acorns. And so it's a real bumper crop of different things. So at our pub, for instance, we're getting, but we trade basketfuls of quince for a glass of champagne, and it's coming up with ideas. But nature kind of tells you what to cook. It's game season, so we'll probably make a nice slow braise of venison with wild mushroom, quince, and a celeriac puree, something like that. But I love teaching. I become visiting professor at Le Cordon Bleu. So I've opened, I think it's around 35 restaurants, England, Edinburgh, Dubai, Stockholm, Paris, New York. So every opening you do, it takes a bit of your life away because they're always different. And but to see them go from nothing, just a mark in the ground, to packed, people having great times, creating. The dining table for me is the last bastion of civilization. We laugh, we cry, we share things, we fall in love, out of love, we do deals, we don't have phones open, we don't have iPads, we're looking into each other's eyes, and humans, our faces are so. I'm gazing at you lovingly now, Pete, but I can see you can you're taking this in, but we can read people at the table, and we can. I just love restaurant tables. I really do. I really love cooking for people. I love teaching people. I left school with nothing, got into a restaurant washing up, but all of a sudden I had a family. It was warm in the kitchen. I got some money. I had instant family, and customers was actually come in the kitchen and say thank you. I said, oh my gosh, this is rock and roll. Really, really luckily, and it was in Essex, I started washing up for Anthony Worrell Thompson, who went on to be a celebrity chef. He was Lady Diana's favourite chef. He sent me to New York to cook. Yeah, it's a bit like fly fishing. Sometimes you need the rub of a green. Sometimes you need a little bit of lucky dust. And that's important. So, and I'm so lucky, Pete, that the first day I got in the kitchen, I can remember like yesterday, I loved it. And now, 52 years later, they can't keep me out of the kitchen. I absolutely adore being in the kitchen, the camaraderie, the heat, the steam, the smells, the beautiful smells. And, and what you create, you look at a plate and you say, my gosh. But certainly fly fishing is up there with it for sure.
It's amazing to hear you speak so lovingly about something that means so much to you, yet you speak in a similar way with fly fishing. And I'm just so thrilled that you've discovered it and what it has meant to you over this period of time. And long may that continue for you as well. I wanted to ask, we could have talked for hours and hours, but we're coming up an hour now. One of the things I wanted to quickly touch on before I ask you about a dream destination and a song, but the Michelin Star, getting one of those must be an incredibly hard amount of work. Yet when you have it, I assume it's equally hard, but in a different way to maintain and keep everything exactly right. Is that part of the drive behind your success in this industry?
That's an excellent question. I never forget at 15, I saw a picture of one of the greatest ever chefs, Paul Bocuse. He's got his hand over his tummy and he's got his hand in the air. And I said, my God, that's what I want to be one day. I want to be a Michelin Star chef. And then years later, I heard the story. He was actually throwing some bread to some doves and his apron string snapped and he was holding his apron against his chest. But I would just do anything, a bit like salmon and sea trout. I would do anything to be near a Michelin star chef. I worked for free. I had no money, but I would go, I would beg, borrow, steal just to get there, to pay my keep and work in some tough kitchens. And so I dreamt and dreamt of it, and I tried and failed so many times. I failed and failed and failed to gain a star. Went down a number of rabbit holes chasing it, which you should never do. And it wasn't until I worked for Sir Terence Conran, I become chef director and become very close with him. And it's a bit like Mark Twain, he said, I forget the quote now, but he said, the older his dad got, the wiser he thought he'd become. But I realized that Sir Terence was baiting me, and he was trying to teach me to cook much more simple and let the ingredients talk for themselves. And I was so thrilled, I think I was 40. It was a 99 2000 guide, something like that. I got my first star. But I dreamt and dreamt and dreamt of getting a Michelin star. And it was in the days before digital. It was, I never forget, I got a phone call from, I think it was the Evening Standard. And someone, the journalist said, "Oh, hi, Chris, what does it feel like to be the first chef to get a Michelin star for Sir Terence Conran?" And I thought it was a friend mucking around, because someone had told me that they knew an inspector and they were never going to give a star to Conran because he had the Bibendum building. He bought the Bibendum building, which was the Michelin building, and they hadn't got a star. And he used to berate them at every opportunity. He would say there's better ways to judge restaurants. So I thought, crikey, we're never going to get it. And so I put the phone down, and then the phone went again, and it was the Times. And they said, "Hi, Chris, this is the Times correspondent. How does it feel to get the first Michelin star for Conran restaurants?" And I said, "Are you serious? How do you know?" And this is what happened in those days. He said, "Well, we've just got the press release." I said, "Well, you're going to have to fax it to me, because I don't believe, before I give you an interview, you need to fax it." But the fax machine was at right the other end of the building. So I ran like a hare. And do you remember how faxes used to come out of a machine? So slowly. It was the longest few moments of my life. But there it was, Orrery Restaurant, Marylebone, 1-star Michelin. And it was like an explosion of elation. I wanted to cry. I wanted to thank everyone around me. But the worst thing ever, Pete, was the next day when I woke up, because it's all I ever dreamt of. And I thought, what now? And your question is so good, because you go from attack into defense. Because holding a Michelin star is every bit as hard as gaining a star. And gosh, I've spoken to Michelin. I've had conversations with them, probably best part of 30 years. And you never know when they're in your restaurant. What anyone says, you do not know when they're in the restaurant. The one thing they're looking for is consistency. They write an incredibly wonderful guide, which is global now. And they advise guests where to go and eat. And so they don't want to send a customer that one day is 2-star, the next day is no star, or one day is 1 star, one day no star. And that's the problem in a lot of kitchens. Chefs will create a fabulous dish, but it's very difficult to get out on a busy Saturday night. It's very difficult when the chef's off to replicate it. If a farmer can't produce the meat, the vegetables consistently, it's all about consistency. So that's what you've got to work upon, day and night, and you're as good as your last plate. But it was, I fell to earth. It felt like, I remember at times it said, it felt like sticking a flag in Everest. But then I fell to earth, and I said, what now? Then you get people start to say, I heard rumor that you might get 2 stars. And I started to become a monster. I didn't like myself. I was driving myself harder, working 7 days, asking Sir Terence for more crystal, for more silver, for less tables. And I looked in the mirror and I said, you know what? I don't like you. I don't like the person. And sometimes we've got to be grateful for what we've got. I dreamt of a star. I got a star. And it, I was 14, and it just really made me grow up. It really taught me to compromise in some ways. And it taught me sometimes dreams are dangerous. Be careful what you dream for. Because keeping it, people have lost their lives. People have committed suicide. over holding stars, and it's I could talk to you forever about Michelin, the myths and the magic of it, but it's jolly well, hard earned, that's for sure. They will say we don't tell you what to cook, which they don't. They judge what's on a plate, they judge what's in front of them. But really, at the end of the day, you want to be pleasing customers, you want to be busy, you want to be happy. But of course, all these things come as you're knocking on the door of being 70. All these realizations come. So I think I'm probably a better cook now than I'm happy in my skin, and I love great food. I love very simple food, Pete. If I'm looking for a restaurant, I love bistros. I love simple cooking. My hobby is Italian food, in actual fact. I love the technique of French and the regions, but I do love Italian food, the simplicity of it.
What a beautiful answer. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's absolutely beautiful. Let's imagine you're going down to fish the test. You've got the rods in the back, hopefully the rods in the tube as well, and everything's packed, you're ready to go. What is the song that sets the tone for that day's fishing?
Oh, gosh. Brilliant question, followed by yet another. I love music. And again, in my job, I've got to meet all my heroes. I love motor racing. I've met David Coulthard. I've cooked for Lewis Hamilton's dad, so many racing drivers, so many footballers I've been able to cook for. But when it comes to music, probably, gosh, I got very, very diverse taste, extremely diverse taste. I love classic. I love heavy metal. I love all sorts of music, and even modern music. I quite like. But I guess it has to be Led Zeppelin. And one night I was cooking. We were practicing for a competition. It was down in Ludlow, which is on another famous river, the Theme. Gosh, I wish I had a fly rod then. Anyway, the hotelier, he said, "Look, I don't think we've got many customers coming in tonight. I'm going to close so you can practice cooking for 8 people. It was for the Mouton Rothschild competition. You had to cook that year, particularly, was the lamb main course. You had to pair it with some beautiful Mouton Rothschild wines. And I was going to cook, and there was going to be some of the chefs, some of the management. And I was just about to kick off, and he come running downstairs, and he said, "Bloody hell, someone's just turned up in a Mercedes Sports, flashy wheels, and a great big earring." And I used to cook for Francis Rossi from Status Quo, and I loved cooking for him, knew exactly what he wanted. And I said, "Oh, it's probably Francis, as he said he would come when I moved kitchen." And I said, "His long black hair, smiley face." And he went upstairs, and he come down, he said, "No," and I said, "Gold curly hair." I said, "What's his name?" He said, "Plant." I said, "What?" I said, "Check his first name." And he come back, he said, "His name's Robert Plant." I said, "Oh my God." And I went upstairs, and there he was, the rock god, golden hair. And I couldn't believe it, Pete. He stayed with us nearly 2 weeks, but in the end, the crowds got too much. And because I had to be responsible, he was taking my younger brother out every night to the pub. And I thought, wasted completely. But I was lucky enough, one night we sat till it got light in the morning, and he was telling me about Live Aid, and he was telling me about everything he'd done. So I think the song would have to be Stairway to Heaven, because the test is heaven to me. And that wonderful crescendo at the end is, if I manage to fool one of those beautiful fish, the fish look different there for some reason. I don't know why. It's just perfect. So yeah, Stairway to Heaven for me.
Nice choice. Lovely story to accompany it as well. Well, Chris, can you tell us, in case people, because I'm sure they're going to love and have enjoyed listening to your story, they might want to come and eat with you as well. Can you tell people about your restaurants and how people can find you on socials and places like that too?
Yes, Pete. Yeah, if anyone out there would love to come to the restaurant and say hi, it's Galvin La Chapelle, which is in Spittal Square in Spitalfields near Liverpool Street in London. And then we have Bistro and Bar next door, which is He's more relaxed, but we often have daily fish on now. There's always something from a fish market. And then we have the beautiful Galvin Green Man, which is out in Great Waltham near Chelmsford, which is a beautiful 700-year-old pub and restaurant. Actually, little did I know, part of the decoration, I said I want everything Chelmsford on the walls. We've got a big bunch of fly reels on the wall. We've got some beautiful illustrations of fish from a River Chelmer. So there's quite a lot of fishing bits and pieces in the pub. Social media, we're Galvin Restaurants. Instagram, I'm Chris Galvin on Instagram. I mainly I follow so many fly fishing and people that do wonderful things in the fly fishing world, and thanks heaven for Instagram. So, that's me.
Chris, thank you so much for that. Thank you for being a wonderful guest. Thank you for your enthusiasm and love and passion for our pastime. And thank you from me for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
Thank you so much, Pete, for having me. And congratulations on your new appointment. You know, I'm so excited for you, everyone at the club. So to fit me in, because I'm sure you're super busy at the moment, I'm even more honoured. And and keep up the great work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris, very much indeed. Well, everyone, this has been the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. It's run over a little bit, but it's all the richer for doing it because it's such a beautiful, passionate story that I hope you'll have enjoyed as much as I have. So thank you so much for listening. There'll be very many more episodes coming very, very soon.
Thanks for listening to the Fly Culture podcast, brought to you in association with the Voice of Game Angling, Trout and Salmon, where Pete is the editor.